I'm going to shift a little bit about talk about the regional landscape and Puerto Rico, and you said a seat at the table. So we need to understand what our strengths and weaknesses, the role of the private sector, the role of the government sector is going forward, based of course on best practices around the world, which you all guys have been involved in. But before we can actually start looking forward, we need to understand where we are right now. And for that, we have two experiences in the panel that I would like the panelists to share. One is of course Lufthansa, and the other one is ourselves, Seaborne Airlines. And in a minute I'll ask Lufthansa to join us and talk a little bit more about why Puerto Rico. For my case, very short, for us it was, we moved the headquarters of Seaborne from the USVI to Puerto Rico. It was three simple factors: location, location, location. It's where our hub is, of course. It's where the base of our network is. It is part of the US. So when you look at other islands within the Caribbean, each island, of course, is a different country. So that's an important, and what I mentioned before, the opportunity to offer our crew members and our entire employees a good place to work for, a lifestyle, and an opportunity for those that are out there, those Puerto Ricans, for example, that migrated to the US to come back to Puerto Rico. Opportunities for the former American Eagle employees to come back to Puerto Rico and work for a Puerto Rico-based airline. Speaking of employees, second reason, it's the deepest pool of talent in the region. That's a fact. And this company, in order to grow, in order to establish itself in San Juan, needed talent from the pilot pool to the technical, to the line, to customer service, etc. And third, of course, the support from the government. The government of Puerto Rico provided a well-rounded package that certainly was able to manage the startup risk. We are, in a sense, a startup. It's various risks related to starting an airline, from job creation to route incentives to real estate that was needed within the airport facilities. And I know that in the panel description we have a section on government-sponsored airlines, and from my perspective, all we're asking is for governments to partner with the airlines to manage that initial risk. And all of the deals, all of the agreements that we have, for example, not just with Puerto Rico, are geared towards managing the initial risk, and then of course phasing out as the company continues to grow, etc., etc. So I'm going to shut up on my side now and leave Elmer to take the podium and talk a little bit about his experience as well.
And first of all, after Dr. Burns, before you go home and nudge your sons and daughters into airline and pilot careers on the mainland, or even as Jaime has added even regional carrier pilot careers in Puerto Rico, there's also mechanics careers now in Puerto Rico, which is very attractive, and I try to show you that's also the thing which has a bright future. First of all, Arnaldo, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a big honor to be with you and with your distinguished guests and panelists here. It's coinciding with our grand opening this weekend, which is a mixed blessing for me because workload is a little piling up on me. But I really have to congratulate you for bringing that together, this impressive event here. And I know many people with great ideas, but not so many who make their ideas work like that. And I really have to congratulate you for that. So let me give you a few thoughts about Lufthansa Technik Puerto Rico. We are doing heavy maintenance. This is the structural check. Earlier it was called D-check, but the manufacturers have changed their terminology. So every 10 years, let's say roughly, the aircraft will be completely disassembled and the parts will be overhauled in workshops, and the remaining metal hull, composite hull for that matter, is being inspected and x-rayed and reassembled after that. That happens every 10 years for a big check, and every 1 to 2 years for a C check, for a smaller check. And we are doing both of these checks in Agadir now. Before we went to Agadir, our network consists of several locations in Europe and 2 in Asia. Actually, that was our network. So Budapest, Sofia, Hamburg, Berlin, Shannon, Malta, and in Asia, Manila and Beijing. And we were blank in the Americas. And we were looking for a place for, I would say, 10 years. I was with this project a little bit more than 2 years, and we were almost certain to go to Mexico at that stage. At that time, Puerto Rico came on our map, and the administration made a powerful approach to challenge our decision, which was almost made by that time. And we looked at Puerto Rico a little bit closer, and we found out, I mean, we didn't know anything about Puerto Rico, like most of the people I know. What we found here in Puerto Rico really matches our requirements. So, as Heimer also pointed out, it's about location, talent pool, and the support. The location, as part of the US, provides the rule of law, obviously, a business climate, which is very supportive. The speed of implementation was important for us, and at any other place we could not have realized a project like that in such a short time, and the proximity to South America. Of all these location factors, probably the most important was also the preference of the airlines. So our customers, launching customers, Spirit and JetBlue, really stood up for Puerto Rico and had a distinct preference over Mexico. And as safety is such a high concern in our industry, being on US soil makes it much easier to manage in cooperation with the FAA under US rules. And today, I think 90% of the narrow-body overhaul market are actually onshore. Only 10% of the work leaves the United States. So, especially JetBlue was very fond to be stronger in Puerto Rico and supported us to go to Puerto Rico and supported Puerto Rico to get that industry in. The talent pool, Puerto Rico has been a manufacturing hub, has the skills are here, especially the engineers. What we don't find here yet in sufficient numbers is aircraft mechanics, and that is still our gambit. We envision to jumpstart that segment of the industry and train many more aircraft mechanics than we currently have. And I think that's not only good for ourselves, but also for other players in the industry and for the people who start that career, because they have lots of opportunities in the US and in the worldwide market, the growing market for aircraft mechanics, and for society at large. I think it will be good for Puerto Rico if it can establish itself as a major source of aircraft mechanics. And you have seen the demographics. For pilots, it's pretty much the same for mechanics. There are lots of young mechanics needed in the US, and the industry struggles very much to to match their salary expectations. Salaries are on the rise on the mainland, that's clear, but the yields, the prices which the airlines are ready to pay for the maintenance works are not rising at the same time, and that puts a crunch on the MRO industry. Yeah, and finally support. The support in Puerto Rico was exceptional on all levels. On the Commonwealth level, on a municipality level, on a lawmakers level, federal level. We were welcomed so warmly and so supportively that we could really, that we felt really encouraged to take a risk. And we found a lot of people to trust, and you need people to trust if you take risks. And that brought us to that decision to come here. That's our construction site in early October. Now even the apron is almost ready. A few facts: we create a little bit more than 400 jobs. We will ramp up to 4 parallel aircraft lines. We have one in operation now since 21st of July. And the second one starts this weekend. We have some 200 people now, and we will ramp up to 400 until 2017. And that's our very first aircraft on its very first day. A Spirit aircraft A320, fully docked in the new facility, state of the art, and we are providing safe and efficient workplaces here for Puerto Rico. The whole thing can only work, and that's the last slide, if we also have a world-class school. And that was part of the project from the beginning. It is not only the second Part 147 school in Puerto Rico and in the whole Caribbean, but it also strives to match the level of Embry-Riddle in Florida or other world-class institutions. It's a long call, obviously, but Puerto Rico has shown that it is capable of doing that with the University of Puerto Rico. And I'm sure we can repeat the trick with aircraft mechanics. And aircraft mechanics is a career like manufacturing, like a manual trade, and all over the world, and especially in the US, and I was in New Jersey to discuss that just a few days earlier. Manufacturing jobs don't have the same appeal like IT jobs or any career which goes through a college education, but they are so much needed also in our modern industry, that on the mainland you have difficulties in some areas to find a welder, and they command salaries up to $120,000. The same I heard even from Mexico. I was in Monterrey last year discussing labor pool, and they told me that the demand for technicians who work with their hands in a specialized trade, that demand outstrips supply by ×5. And also in Mexico there are areas where tool makers can command a 6-figure salary. So that goes often overlooked, and when you go back to talk to your sons and daughters about pilots and mechanics opportunities, also think of manufacturing. There are alternatives to a college degree, which is expensive, and there's no guarantee whatsoever that this education is needed in the industry later on. For our students, we offer a 6 months aeronautical training, basic aeronautical training at the new institute here. And after that, we let them start work in the hangar and earn their own money and continue their education in parallel. So they can complete their license, they can complete associate degrees, bachelor degrees, a whole aerospace career. This is inspired by the German model of education, dual education, which blends theoretical and practical training in the companies. And this is something which we want to promote here also in Puerto Rico. And the workforce which went through that training and has acquired those manual skills and can be welders or tool makers or any industrial job will also be needed in other companies in the aerospace sector or in the manufacturing sector. And perhaps we can be really on the forefront of a change here, which also is going on in the US. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the beginning the multiplier effect and of the industry. If you can speak to your experience in Aguadilla in terms of how the development of the MRO and the operations have impacted other labor pools within the region and within the entire island.
Well, our hope is, and together with the government, that the company which we build and the cluster in which we work, which has other aerospace companies like Honeywell or Infotech, will create direct and indirect jobs, which are multiple of our own employees, and the economic impact of the employment itself, but also of the suppliers and all the related services which we call up. They are estimated at $2.2 billion over the next 30 years for our Lufthansa investment alone. That was the rationale for the government to support this risky investment. I think the industry will strive if we are able to build the labor pool, right? The critical mass of technicians, which then also help other companies to come here. Any other company considering Puerto Rico will ask first the question, do we find the right people to employ? So that's the first step. And here the government and society has an obligation, because no company can do that.
Okay. Thank you, Elmar. And now, talking about Puerto Rico a little bit more, it's no doubt that Puerto Rico has had very good, tremendous success stories so far in this industry. However, the reality is that Puerto Rico is actually at its infancy as it relates to the global marketplace. And some of you mentioned that we need to define what our seat at the table is going forward. So I have a few questions to Rafael. I think you were the one that mentioned that. What do you think that seat at the table should be? I'd like to hear also same thoughts from Jose Raul, who's from Puerto Rico, and I'm sure knows Puerto Rico's dynamics as well. And then Keith, question for you, as you might know, Puerto Rico has a very strong history in the manufacturing industry. So is manufacturing a seat at the table that we can get? And given that, of course, the base that has been built throughout the years and and the availability of real estate throughout the island. And I know that there's a buzzword now, which is production systems, which we were talking about last night. So are we ready to transform ourselves from manufacturing base to production systems, given Puerto Rico's history and its competitiveness vis-a-vis other destinations? So it's a lot of questions, so I'm gonna start with Rafael about our seat at the table right now.
But thank you for the question. Actually, Keith and I have spoken a lot about this issue over the years, and I think we actually have a good conversation about that. So I'd like to flip my time first to Keith, because I think he deals with some issues that I'd like to respond to. So Keith.
Go ahead.
Sure. So I think the question is certainly an interesting question. The seat at the table, it requires kind of knowing the path to the seat, right? We've talked a lot about, the challenges of technicians and labor, and part of what is required for Puerto Rico and any aerospace cluster, for that matter, is understanding what those demand signals mean. Right? So for Lufthansa Technik, it's getting the right technicians and the right skill sets to disassemble and go through the checks and reassemble. What we've seen over the past 3 to 5 years, it's no secret, but I think it's good to calibrate at this point. There's no new commercial programs, right, in our industry right now, right? We have commercial programs that are winding down. They're moving into production, post-production. Of course, the military has constant, programs, if you will, on a smaller scale, but there's no new massive outside the long-range strike bomber and the vertical lift program in America. So if you're positioning yourself for the future, you have to position yourself into where the demand is. And the manufacturing environment is production systems. It's employing big data. It's understanding how to put the systems in place to pull out that data and interpret that data. And there's predictive health monitoring and all kinds of different kind of services that help manufacturing environments. There's the ability to production plan and the process planning around those. Those are the key skill sets that, if you're going to be competitive in the next 5 to 10 years, that you need to have in your portfolio and within your cluster. So I think I would start there, in terms of the readiness position to be competitive. If you want to be a world-class manufacturer, if you want to be a part manufacturer, if you want to, go after the commodity business, because we talked a lot about the cost pressures in the industry, and those are not going away, because we are moving into a more, I think, enhanced global marketplace. Despite what you might believe in terms of, there's duplication rules and Boeing and Airbus, there's still a huge demand out there, for that aircraft. And so I think that's, that cost pressure is going to continue to require that you compete at your high margin space, or value, or commodity. Puerto Rico is looking for a seat at the table on the high margin side and the value. So I would start to explore the conversation from that perspective.
What is the role of partnerships in that equation?
I think it's huge, right? So one of the things that we've done is, again, I'm industry, so tier 2, tier 3, engineering, manufacturing. One of the things we've done is we've embraced the give up the gain model. And so we've given up parts of our market share to embrace partners that help enhance our value. And I think if you look at, the universities, and I had a great conversation last night with Vijay from, local university here, talking about how can universities partner with, mainland universities on research and development projects, the OEMs and the tier 1s, and we certainly embrace that when we take solutions back into clients like Honeywell and Boeing and others. So I think partnerships are a big part of that alternative to growing by acquisition. It's growth through your partnerships.
Keith, I think, provided a great framework to sort of transition our thinking around ecosystems. And the ecosystem being, if you look at the totality, the full continuum of activities and services that are conducted in the aviation space or aerospace industry, for example, and begin to understand where the shifts are taking place, both at the macro and the global level, and locally, and where the competitive market is beginning to move. And this concept of partnership is key. So as Puerto Rico begins to think about that seat at the table, I would say before you actually decide, what's the seat at the table, you've got to begin to make some choices about where you want to invest your energy and your time, in what part of the marketplace do you imagine that Puerto Rico can play in this large ecosystem. So think about partnerships. So in California, I talked a little bit about the extent to which the aerospace industry is a significant economic driver. But California, like many other jurisdictions, is beginning to look, and the companies that are located in California have been and continue to look elsewhere in the marketplace. We had the map up. It's the BRIC countries, certainly it's in Brazil, Russia, to a certain extent, India and China. How does Puerto Rico begin to look at intersecting into that growth area and making a play for occupying a portion of that space? So what is it that the companies are going outside of the Americas to find that Puerto Rico can capture a percentage of the market share? So that starts with beginning to think about, again, where do you want to play? What do you want your customer base to be? And how do you integrate that into the ecosystem that you're currently building with Lufthansa, which again, I add my congratulations to Lufthansa on its enlightened decision to come to Puerto Rico. But where is it that we want to be 10, 15 years from now? And how do we begin to build that trajectory towards that? So I'm very excited, for example, about something that Elmar talked about, around improving the safety and quality of the safety around the maintenance and repair operation. So we begin to think about that as an opportunity. How do you begin to think about intelligent systems and how intelligent systems can be designed, either from the hardware or the software standpoint, to be able to augment and meet some of the needs, to be able to reduce the risk associated with the safety and the quality of the work that's going to be done in Aguadilla. That's an example of a specific driver to respond to here a partner, someone who's invested in Puerto Rico, a partner's needs. How do you help solve Lufthansa's problem? Now, it's not going to be done by the government of Puerto Rico. It's going to be done in the private sector, but what you need to begin to do is to begin to look for where are there pockets of excellence right now, for example, in intelligent design, intelligent systems. And because we have wonderful universities here, establish specific partnerships with those universities, wherever they are around the globe, to bring a repository of excellence around intelligent system design, specifically tailored to safety and quality in the maintenance and repair. That's just one example of how you align your going forward plans with the needs of those who have made an investment here in Puerto Rico to begin to build the trajectory. Because you can't play in the entirety of the ecosystem. And finally, I'll just mention one other notion, which is something where we're seeing radical change globally, again, is around supply chain and the movement and the transportation of goods, where the normal carriers, whether it's Deutsche Post or US Postal Service, now are looking to transition their business models. You have firms like Amazon, for example, that are looking very heavily at investing in the movement of packages, for example. How does Puerto Rico become the gateway and establish a partnership, for example, with Amazon, and say, can we be your partner to move goods from North America into South America? What does that take? What does that look like? What kind of relationships do you need? What support do you need from the academic and research and development community here? And again, if you identify those gaps, what's missing, where do you go to find a partner? That's the kind of ecosystem that has to be built, but aligns around the trusted relationship that has been established, for example, in Lufthansa, and you commit yourself to a plan of action that is to support a specific area of interest and risk that Lufthansa has identified, and how do you work together to mitigate that risk? This is a wonderful opportunity for Puerto Rico because you're at the nascent, the early stage of this. You can invent, you can create your your future. But you have to focus around where is it that you want to invest your time and your energy and your limited resources, what partnerships you want to establish, what commitments you want to make, so that you can develop a roadmap that your partners will trust that can be executed. So they can make those 10, 15, 20-year investments here in Puerto Rico because they know they have a long-term partner.
Rafael, any comments?
Well, one quick comment on that, because we talked about the constraints here, and I think that's common. Most people in this room have heard that as like a challenge with Puerto Rico is there's a resource constraint of labor, right? But that's where partnerships help mitigate that concern, right? And so when you develop those partnerships, you expand on your ability to execute, more complex or solution-based offerings back in the industry.
Can you mention, you talked about California, so any other best practices, example out there that you can mention in terms of where we are right now and where, in deciding, the process of deciding where the seat of the table is going to be, etc. Where can we look for as best practices for developing this industry going forward?
Okay. Clearly there are interesting examples. A lot has been talked about Mexico, for example. So Mexico has become a player in certain segments of this industry. Singapore is another place where they've embarked on long strategic plans to be able to again capture a certain percentage of market share in again certain segments of this industry. But what we have to recognize is some of the liabilities we're up against here, particularly in the Americas, with the shift that's taking place. So MRO work, for example, and Elmar can comment on this much more in depth than I can, but what we have seen as we look at that marketplace, the MRO work is shrinking in the United States in particular. So it's not viewed as a growth industry in the United States, but it is growing outside of the United States. So why are those shifts taking place? That would be an interesting area for you, Elmar, to comment on from an industry perspective, why that is happening and what's driving that.
Well, I think it's questionable whether the MRO market is shrinking in the US. We get lots of more planes. I mean, our whole industry is still growing, and in our segment, narrow-body aircraft work, it will grow by 5% per year over the next years, just by the number of aircraft which will enter into the market. In the long term, there could be reduction by more reliable planes, but this is still further out. For certain, there are other areas or other regions in the world which grow even more rapidly, but I wouldn't write off the MRO market in the US. I see the same dynamics as with the pilots coming up for the mechanics.
Go ahead.
I just have a couple of comments because I thought that you were asking a little earlier. I couldn't agree more with Rafael in the sense of thinking about where does Puerto Rico see itself in a long-term view of things strategically in this market. We've been talking about an aviation cluster, and that is important, but it also helps for Puerto Rico to identify in the long-term thinking of things, to think about this industry as a supply chain, right? What position in this supply chain does Puerto Rico occupy? What is needed in the market that isn't being supplied and that Puerto Rico can supply that better? And I mention this specifically because this has been a question that every economic development endeavor in Puerto Rico for the last 25 to 30 years has asked, right? And here we have some of the pioneers of economic development, Puerto Rico, Bill Reef, who's sitting in the audience, knows this. That has been a question that folks, when they're making economic decisions in Puerto Rico, have been asking themselves.
for a very long time, which is, what does the world need that we can produce? Instead of saying, what do we have that we can sell, is what can we make that the world can buy? And I'm saying that specifically in the case of how we think about these issues. This requires, on the one hand, non-traditional thinking on the aviation industry, and my colleagues on the panel have mentioned some of these areas, which I think are very important. The move forward that Lufthansa Technique has done, and the confidence that it's placed in Puerto Rico is very important, and that can be used precisely as a guideline to propel other such risk-taking initiatives. The other thing that I want to mention in regards to this notion of long-term thinking and about what the world needs that we can produce is what we expect of best practices. There is a tendency in long-term economic thinking in Puerto Rico, whatever little long-term thinking happens in economic development strategies in Puerto Rico, to import best practices or to look at best practices as things that one can readily adapt to the Puerto Rico environment. The idea of best practices is to see what is the interface of local talent, local knowledge, with a product that is required, right? And so finding ways in which one can think better about what one is able to produce and supply in the global markets. And again, so when we think about aviation, it isn't just to think about how Mexico created a successful aviation cluster, which by the way, is tremendously successful. But how is it that Mexico did an analysis? Was it that Mexico working, and again, an all-hands-on-deck effort between government and industry, the partnership model that the panel was talking about? How is it that they crafted a partnership that works locally, that works for the capacities of the economy and for the talent that's in the economy, to create a world-quality product? And that is something, certainly, as co-panelists were saying, it is a unique opportunity that Puerto Rico has in a nascent field to put this kind of forward thinking ahead of the curve, and then to look and then to develop long-term strategies that represent credible commitments.
I also commend and support your earlier thoughts about opportunities which relate to safety and which are needs in our industry. In Monterey, I've seen research on augmented reality. And this is a very interesting thing for all of us in all areas of life, but also for aircraft maintenance. We are not there yet. We are still working on paper with our job cards. We try to do that electronically, but the challenge is that if you take a tablet to the aircraft, there are few areas which are really suitable for that. So the landing gear work is still very dirty, and these things are easily forgotten, and it's the next step. You can see already in science fiction movies like Oblivion, Pacific Rim, when the operators actually see, as part of their 3D world, the real world, the virtual controls and documents in front of them, and that will come. It would be beautiful if we could do that in aircraft maintenance, because tablets are just not a suitable alternative to paper. But if it was in a dirty environment, virtually projected in front of you, what you have to read and what you have to control, that would be beautiful. I didn't know whether you have that in mind, but that would be very good.
Okay, so we're going to start to wrap it up as we're running a bit late on the agenda. So I'd like to open up the floor for any questions at this moment. We're here? Yes.
Gentlemen, in terms of numbers, and I don't be specific, but how many mechanics are you looking for? And how large is this demand for people that you need? And of course, you know, it takes, I would think, anywhere to get a good mechanic, 2 to 3 years to train at that point. I don't know the specifics.
Yes. Roughly 300 of our 400 people are mechanics. And yes, no, we are not there yet, but that's the ratio. At the moment we have some 200 people of that, like 120 mechanics. The school, which you still see on the screen, should be good for 350 students in parallel. But we can only sustain that if we are not the only users at the end. And the big unknown here is our attrition rate. We have to face the fact that a good education with a good name to come from also gives you career opportunities in the States. And that's all fine up to 10% of attrition, but if you are faced, like Dr. Burns pointed out, like much more than 10%, then it's critical.
Just a follow-up question. Like all careers, you have an entry level. Have you also identified, 4-year, 5-year, longer-term education that's required and the rest of the technology? Is that part of the solution that we're seeing right now?
Yes, the school shall also offer opportunities for further education up to master's degrees. And we are certainly also looking at research opportunities, which would enable us to tap into other funds and in cooperation with the university.
If I may add a comment to that, this is, what Elmar is talking about is, it refers to what I was saying earlier also about this all hands on deck effort. The Department of Homeland Security, for example, we are confronting the problem, and this is a separate field, but just to use it as a case. We are in charge of protecting the cyber environment for the federal government, not to mention that we are the repository of something called the NKIC, which is an information sharing platform for industry on cyber attacks. Right now, we have more than 2,200 open positions for cybersecurity experts. The thing about this, however, is that yes, we compete with industry over salaries. But the problem is that when we talk to people at the college level, by the time that people get to college, it's already too late for these kinds of things because they have already made up their minds. They already have some career path defined as however they want to define it. And they don't see the returns on the investment of switching to something that simply promises them a job. Whereas, even as we show them how this could be a career, whereas if we've gone to high schools, and we're starting to do this at a much younger level and showing a career path for folks. And it's actually starting to pay results for us. So when we think about the aviation cluster in Puerto Rico, for example, this isn't just a matter of economic development or a matter of transportation or a matter of private sector. Department of Education, for example, how do we get people in high schools and in elementary schools even? Because that's when kids get interested in this business, right? They get interested because they want to fly. They want to work with the machines that fly. Or however you want to define it. And so, again, it's part of that idea that this is, in how we think creatively about this and how we think of this holistically.
Thank you all for your participation. Gentlemen, it's been an honor for myself to be part of this panel. I think each one of you has a direct tie to Puerto Rico, to this beautiful island of Puerto Rico, so we trust that in your different fields you will certainly be a key player in making sure that Puerto Rico has that seat on the table that we all desire. So the panelists are going to be here for the rest of the evening, the afternoon, sorry. So please feel free to also approach them directly for any other questions. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time for additional questions. Thank you.